All right, now, hello everybody, and welcome to another Hobby Cheating Q&A live. Sorry about that. My dog stepped on my headset and muted it. So, what are we doing today? Well, today, what we're doing is we are, of course, getting together. We're going to spend about the next hour, and I'm going to do my best to answer all your hobby-related questions. I see there's already many people in the chat, so that's great. If you can start, everybody wants to drop your comments over. I never know which side it's on. I don't know. Here, there's a little place where you can leave comments. Go ahead and drop your questions over there, and I will do my level best to answer them over the next roughly hour or so we're going to spend together. So we'll and then we'll go from there. It's going to be a fun time, and hopefully we'll get a lot of good answers, a lot of good questions. All right. Yeah, sorry about the silence at the very beginning. Glad we caught that quickly. That would have gotten annoying fast. All right. Let's see. Hello to everybody, by the way, who's in the comments. Hope everybody's having a great Saturday or whatever day it is. I guess if you're way over in Australia or something, it's probably Sunday by now. Let's get into some questions. All right. Anthony says, how well are you sleeping at night knowing that in 2 weeks I'm going to crush your daughters on the battlefield? I sleep pretty well, man. I mean, I don't sleep much, but I sleep well during the time I'm sleeping. And also, you're out of your mind. I'm going to peel you like a sour fruit. So I look forward to that happening, and a very fun game. All right, let's see. Anthony Webb says, looking to try some gel-based paints. Which would be a better start, watercolors or scale 75? My honest answer would be, I don't know. By that, what I mean is, like, I don't know, because it's going to be kind of what's better for you. My honest recommendation is pick up a set of each. Like, you can buy both in sort of these sets of about 8 paints. Get one of each. Like, find a color set you like in watercolors or something like that. And then find one of the scale 75 sets you like. I really love the scale 75 flesh set, for example. I think it's one of the better sets they've made. The non-metallic gold set's pretty great. Non-metallic steel set's pretty great. The like blues set is pretty awesome. So, I mean, I like all of them. I was just looking up at my wall and looking at what I have. But my answer is grab one of both, play around with them, and see which one suits you better. Like, really give it a good go on a couple different models and go from there. To be completely honest, I use them like the pro acrylics have been added in, but it's probably like 35, 35, 20 now with the pro acryl. But like my painting, like what I'm doing with this Slanesh stuff, right? Like, this is 95% of it is just me going back and forth between watercolors and scale 75. So there you go. Okay. Jay Free says his dog killed his first Space Marine today. Was a problem. I had one of the dogs that I have, the one who's actually sleeping in this chair. You can't see her, but she's down there. Used to like to steal figures when she was a puppy. I had to close all the like shelves that were at that level. Okay. Let's see. How do I feel about Scale 75's fantasy color set? In other words, that the fantasy and games range. Sorry, that's from LA. Love them. They're great. I mean, I just mentioned using them. I'm using that interchangeably right now. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those paints in the current stuff I'm painting of the fantasy and games, and then like 3 of regular Scale 75, 1 of the FX color, which I guess is technically fantasy and games, and then like 4 pro colors and 5 pro colors and 5 war colors. So yeah, yes, love them. They are a little more like traditional paints, so if like they're a good bridge into scale 75, that's what I'll say. Michael Anderson, how do you decide whether to use an ink or a paint? What are the best times to use an ink? I use them quite interchangeably. The best times to use an ink are when you're wanting something more transparent. I mean, that's the short answer, right? You don't generally base coat with inks if you're trying to like get a solid color down. But like when I'm using something, I tend to be a glaze painter. I tend to paint quite thin. And if you're like inks are generally pretty interchangeable with the way I'm painting. So if there's a color I like I use Payne's gray as a shadow color on many things. I use white, Daler-Rowney white, because it's smooth. That's probably the only non-transparent one. Like that white is just a way to get a smooth white, especially when you mix it with like a golden heavy body acrylic titanium white. That's usually how I do my white. So I kind of use them interchangeably. The question is there a color you like, and are you trying to get a transparent effect? Are you trying to get a tint? Are you trying to, achieve a pseudo wash-like effect where you want darker colors to gather in the recesses? All those kinds of things. Yeah, I don't like the simplest answer is, are you trying to make the paint transparent in some way because you're shading or you're you're glazing or something? Inks are generally really good for that. That's, I guess, the simplest answer I can give. Ben says, watch the dry brushing hobby cheating videos. It still looks like chalk. How do I fix it? Do I just base coat color and start it over again? No. So here's how you can fix it. So makeup, hopefully you're using a nice soft makeup brush. Hopefully you're getting rid of most of the paint. Like if it's still chalking, get rid of more paint and softer strokes and more strokes. Try different paints. It could be the paint you're using. Like, I don't know what you're dry brushing with. So some paint is incredibly chalky by its nature. And you can always glaze over a dry brush, like a chalky dry brush, to make it look smooth. Okay, so like, I don't know this is going to show, but you see that guy's legs? Like, that doesn't look chalky, right? Like, they had been dry brushed over. All of that model had been. This whole model's been dry brushed. Right? I don't think he looks chalky anywhere. That's just because I went back over it with glazes. So that would be my best advice. Soft brush, light touch, as little paint as you can imagine in the brush. Like, wipe until you think it's empty, then do it more. Okay? There you go. All right. Anthony Webb, wrong person. I'm not sure what you mean, Anthony. Another person who asked a question was also Anthony. It's not in the comments, but I know who he is. Maybe that's what you're saying. I don't know. All right, HL17. How to make metal paint look duller, just duller, like a used metal, not darken it with an ink or a wash. Well, that's the answer, really. You want to dull it. The real answer is there's two different methods of sort of dulling out steel. I assume you want to look like old weathered iron is generally what people are going for, but you don't want it to look rusted. You're just looking for beaten. Take a pretty beat up brush, take some black ink, and stipple it. Very lightly stipple it onto there, right? That will achieve the effect you're wanting. If you want it to be very subtle, stipple a Nuln Oil on. That'll achieve the same thing. It'll dull it out and make it, and like you just repeatedly stipple until it dries. Stipple, 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 let it dry, stipple, 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 and that will give you that look, because old metals tend to dull in a spotty fashion where water collects in the porous surface of the steel. So it doesn't all happen at once, like where the oxidation is occurring. So as opposed to trying to do a smooth layer of it, where you're creating and controlling the light. So like I use black ink to also then create shades in my metals, like I'm controlling the light. If you stipple, you'll get that effect. If you add a very slight brown tone, I'm not talking about rust. I'm talking about an extremely slight brown tone. Mix a tiny drop of like Seraphim Sepia into your stippling ink or whatever, or something like that. So it has this hint of brown. Hint, tint, slight touch. Less than that. What are you thinking right now? Half of that. Okay. Then you'll get the same effect, because old steel tends to also look like weathered, and oxidation, like water that's hitting it and oxidizing it. Earth water tends to have some kind of dirt in it, often detritus, like there is dust particles in the air, and that will often get reflected in a very slight sort of yellow brown tinge in the steel. So hopefully that helps. All right. Lego Story Workshop. Hi, Vince. Is there any specific kind of cork that works better for basing? Half-inch thick or quarter-inch versus half-inch, fine grain versus normal? I have no idea. Yes, sure. Any of those are fine. Doesn't matter, because you don't want to actually use the cork. The cork itself should never be exposed. It should always be covered by something. It's just a material used to build up the rock. you know, you can have like little bits of the edges kind of exposed every so often, but you should always jab your cork up, cover it with grit, sand, paste, you know, Vallejo basing paste, something. It should never be raw cork. So, like, honestly, 1/4 inch is probably better because then you can build up more individualized layers, but I've used both and it's fine. Yeah, but I mean, yeah, just like generally the size of your model, think about like you want it to be pretty thin, right? Like as that way it's I went and bought like a bunch of there was like some cork. It was like just stacks of cork at IKEA. I think they're meant to be like placemats or something. I don't know. I bought those and they were pretty cheap. And I just break those up. But you can get them at like Home Depot and Lowe's. Thinner is generally better just so you can stack and you make the choice then about how, you know, how much you want it to be tall. All right, let's see. All right, Mickey, her question got missed. Sorry, Mickey. I now seem to add surfactants to all of my paint mixes to improve the flow. Do you do the same, or are there circumstances where you leave it out? I don't mix it directly to the paint, but I do keep a flow improver. So let me say 2 things. I always my paint water in my cup and my paint water in my wet palette has drops of surfactant in it at all times. 1, because it's antimicrobial, and 2, because it then, like, all the water that seeps up has this very slight property of flowing better. I always keep flow improver also separate. That's like 1 part to 100 or something, right? Like it's very minimal effect. I also then always keep flow aid active on my palette. Like generally I start a painting session by putting a couple drops of flow aid onto my wet palette. And yeah, generally like my brush is moving around between normal water and that, and then going into the paint. So my answer is often yes. Now, when I don't, when I want thick paint, like I'm going to do a hobby cheating sometime soon about not thinning your paints, like when not to thin your paints. And there are certainly plenty of times where you don't want to thin your paints, where thinning your paints is bad. But when I'm engaged in one of those activities, like if I'm trying to do some kind of like pretty heavy wet blending, so I want a nice thick paint that I can smooth out and void and that kind of thing, you know, that would be a good example of when I don't. Okay. Comrade Kelther. Hi, Vince. What do you think about the Vallejo Nocturna flesh paints? I haven't tried them yet, in all honesty. I mean, I like Vallejo paints just fine. So I don't know that there's any great different formulation to them. From what I looked like and saw, they were a pretty standard Vallejo formulation, but set to a very specific tinge of flesh color. I liked the color range from what I saw. I just haven't picked them up yet. There's a lot of paints I need to pick up. I can't buy all of them. I already have probably 500 paints sitting around me right now. That's probably undercutting. I haven't counted recently. I have a lot. But I want to get the new scale 75 artist colors. I want to pick up Chimera colors, that kind of stuff. So it will all be tested. I promise. I'll get to all of them eventually. Oh, there you go. Roddick says he has them right now in front of him, and they're quite good. There you go. Excited for the new scale 75 paints. Yeah, I'll give them a shot. I mean, I'm interested in them. I like heavy body acrylics. I use heavy body acrylics, like just the golden, you know, pretty frequently, and they seem a take on that's formulated more for miniatures, with a longer drying time chemistry and probably a more refined and smaller pigmentation, because those are still, the pigment on those isn't ground quite as fine because it doesn't need to be. They're assuming you're using those on, you know, a much bigger canvas than a miniature. Hey, Vince, what's a good method for painting a large piece of stone, e.g. the herd stone? I have a video in my hobby cheating series called Painting Realistic Stone. Realistic and weathered stone. That is my answer. That video will explain it better than I can. The short answer is lots of stippling, dry brushing, washing, all simple techniques, walking back and forth and integrating lots of different colors in, greens and browns and other natural colors that would occur in the world. But it's all just like literally the multiple application of very simple processes. Okay. Ethan, getting the master's airbrush set, start with airbrushing. Would you suggest one with the air tank or not? Sure, doesn't matter. I mean, like, just there should be an all-in-one kit that's just the cheap compressor and like a G22 airbrush and the hose and all that kind of stuff. It's like $80 USD. Find that kit, whatever that one is. I don't think you need the tank to start. It doesn't matter. Like, people will oversell you on starting out airbrushing and be like, oh, you've got to get this really nice brush and this really nice tank. Bupkis, garbage. Start cheap. Start as cheap as you can because you are going to break your airbrush. Compressors all tend to last about the same amount of time. People are like, well, you don't get as an even of a flow if it doesn't have a tank. Okay, sure. Were you planning on doing airbrush quality like crystal brush winning painting? No. Then were you planning on priming stuff and base coating some models? Yes. Then it's fine. It's fine. Like many people I know who are excellent pro painters, just that's where they started because that was you need to learn the ropes. If you were going to get a new car, I wouldn't hand you like in your 16, I wouldn't hand you like a BMW 5 Series. I'd buy you some old junker because you're going to screw that car up and leave cheeseburger wrappers all inside and probably accidentally ram into a curb and, bend the wheel. So the same thing will happen here. And that's okay. It's a good learning tool. I'd say go as cheap as you can. I used the compressor without a tank for like 2 years until it died. Got a good 2 years out of it. And then I bought a nicer compressor with a tank. But still the master line, by the way. Still just that one that was, a little more expensive. Compressors, cheap ones tend to be better because compressors are a mechanical thing that all have a lifespan of about 2 to 3 years. Some will last longer. Like you might have a compressor you've had for like an airbrush compressor you might have had for 10 years. Some will last that long. They will just never die. And some will die in like a year. They're very finicky things. So I tend to be like, well, if I can buy 3 of this cheaper one for one of the more expensive one, and I get 6 years of effort out of that, it's an even swap because I might have gotten 3 to 4 out of the nicer one. Cool. That's all my personal opinion. All right. Jay Free says, I was surprised when I saw you edge highlighting with white ink. Yeah, do it all the time. I very frequently edge highlight with white ink. Or white ink mixed into maybe like I'll tinge it with some other color just to bring it close to the other thing. But I like very stark edges when I do it generally. What paints are you going to use for your Warcry party? I don't know, man. I'll have to see what those Warcry parties look like. Let's see. Yeah, there you go. Jay Freeze was agreeing with me on the airbrush. Yeah, it's just great to learn on, cheap compressor, like a nice all-in-one kit. It's a cheap compressor, relatively cheap airbrush. You'll break it, you'll use it, you'll learn a lot. You'll learn how to airbrush, how to control your trigger. You'll be zenithal priming you'll be painting 2 or 3 times the number of figures in half the time. So you can do the math on that. It's pretty great. Let's see. Right-handed paintbrush or left-handed paintbrush? Well, I go for the right-handed since I'm right-handed. I generally find it just more comfortable. Vince, I don't know why you're quoting Animaniacs, but I'm okay with that. Let's see. Miniatures paintbrush. White is the bane of mine. I've seen your video on the topic, but can't seem to get it right. Well, remind me about it in this weekend. That's what I'll say. Not today, obviously, but talk to me about it in a week, Rob. I'll have all the paints there, and we'll get you set up, buddy. Let's see. Ben, I'm always wondering if you have to use GW paints if you're doing a project piece for them. No, definitely not. I mean, absolutely not. Not most. I shouldn't say that. Many Golden Demon winners are painted with other paints, and that's fine. Like they can't tell. There's no difference. Like it's not a visible thing. The same thing gets tossed around for like airbrush stuff. Now, if you're an in-house painter, that is, say if you're on the heavy metal team or in the army painter team, yeah, you use GW paints, of course, which is fine. I mean, they like that's what they use, and obviously they get great effects out of them. But I mean, that's the level of mastery, right? Those people, you look at them and they've been painting with those same paints for hundreds and thousands of miniatures for multiple years. They know the exact properties. They know exactly how to get the most out of them. So, experience can do a lot. Okay. What are the rules for asking questions? You ask them. They should be hobby related because that's what we're here for. Thus endeth the rules. All right. VB, do you think GW will announce the Slanesh release before or at Adepticon? Probably at Adepticon for an April release, but time will tell. I'm thinking of getting some war colors. Any colors that stand out? Would you recommend their one coat paints? If you're just getting into them, yes, I would, because it can be very difficult to base coat, especially if you're not using an airbrush with war colors. I usually will airbrush with war colors with my base coat. Like all of my base coats are glazes, so I don't mind. They glaze perfectly for that. If you're not using zenithaling and stuff like that, it's going to be a much tougher time for you. Like never go over black. That is a losing proposition. So at minimum, you need a neutral tone. Favorite colors, they have a fantastic like non-metal ochre line. Their ochres are really, really wonderful. Their flesh set is really good, but really weird. You have to kind of train yourself how to use it. I should do a tutorial on that sometime. Because I really like their flesh. I use their flesh constantly. I think they have one of the most quality flesh sets out there. It's them and the Scale 75 flesh set. Those are the two sort of things I put together for Caucasian flesh tones. Their purple, which is actually pink, is amazing. Their violet, which is actually purple, is amazing. And their turquoise, which is actually turquoise, is top shelf. Other things I love, their glaze line is like mind-blowingly good. So like if you see me doing this Slanesh stuff, sure, this is fine. We'll do this. You see me doing this Slanesh stuff where I have these big transitions from like purple to bright fluorescent pink. That's Warcolor's fluorescent pink and Warcolor's fluorescent, as well as the FX fluorescent pink, as well as the Warcolor's pink glaze. Doing big transitions like this is so easy with that glaze. It is. Their glazes are so top shelf. I have a review on them, and it's a limited color range, but they are wonderful. Their fluorescents are wonderful. They are so intense. So yeah, that's my thoughts on that. There's a video that's going to go live in about 36 minutes where I use one of the red glazes as well. So you'll see that. Okay. Hopefully that helps. Anyone know if Army Painters rebranded Vallejo? I don't know if they're made at the same place. They're their own paints. They might have a single source manufacturer, but I legitimately don't know. All right. Hey, sometimes the chat will jump and then I have to like go back. Oh my goodness, we got a lot of questions. I need to make sure I'm catching up here. Okay, how do you paint white hair? Oh, it's a good question. I should really do a white hair tutorial. I'll add that. The short answer is I generally will paint the hair almost exclusively white and then shade it back down slowly, going down to mid-tone, deepish grays at the shadow points. I shouldn't say that. I don't paint it completely white. I paint it like a high white gray. Shade down the shadow areas into more midish gray. Take the lines in between, the stripes in between, into a darker gray. Work a slight tinge, a very slight of some other color in to reflect like the environmental light pollution, and then use pure white on your highlights to still catch your light ring. I'll do a video. That's a good one. How have I not done that yet? Wow. Okay, I'll make sure I do that. I'm sorry that I haven't done that. Dice Must Flow. Vince, trying to do Archon the Black, starting with the skulls and the mount. Wanted a fluorescent bluish color. Did nihilus oxide and blue tint wash, then did a dry brush, light turquoise, white, not happy. Well, I mean, I'll tell you how I would do it is I would get them all pretty white, and then I would do like a very thin sort of wash with like a deep, like a Payne's gray ink that I'd mix some flow improver and some thinner into. Then I would probably wash them with like some kind of actual strong blue. Like I'd thin down a Huldra blue, and then I'd go back with a brush and actually pick out all the skulls with like pull them up to white blue on each skull and have the edges be white. If you want it to look really good, you're going to have to go in and actually work on each skull, but it doesn't take that long. Just get a big brush and work them out. That would be how I would take it on, with a glowing blue color, because then your deep recesses are going to be super dark and the edges are going to be pretty white blue. Let's see. Robert Crozier, I sent you a picture of a jacked up Pegasus about a week ago via Facebook, which the Pegasus. I mean, it's like with transitions. I think I responded to you, but if I didn't, I'm sorry. I mean, the answer is you're painting in white. I would go watch my How to Paint Smooth White video. That's really the answer, because you need to bring it down with some smoother transitions and stuff, like into mid-tone colors, grays, blues, add a color, very slight color. When I say add a color, this is one of those things that new painters think. When I say add blue, people like think, oh, okay, I'll add blue. And then they go grab this. Right? And that's not what I mean. What I mean is like take this and go 1 to 100 with some other color, right? I'm exaggerating slightly, but I'm trying to really push home the point. Like my face has blue in it right now. There's blue tone here and here from the cold blue light above me. There's also pink here, here, and here, right? But like my answer is some thin glazes should smooth it out. That's the simplest, I think, answer I can give. All right. Since you talk about some paint do look chalky than others when dry brush. Can you name some of those brands so I can avoid them? I often use oil paint to dry brush. I've never, I don't think I've ever really used oil paint to dry brush. I use oil paints a lot. I love oil paints, but I don't think I've used them to dry brush. I mean, you can. There's nothing different about it that would stop you. I don't know what that effect would look like because I haven't done it. Sure. Vallejo, just model color white is generally pretty good. Like it's a nice, smooth, generally creamy white. It's usually my white dry brush. Nothing too particular. I've started using some of the Pro Acryl Bold Titanium White lately to dry brush. It's nice and smooth. It's got some flow improver stuff in it. I actually really love it. So it's one of the better miniature paint whites around. I love white. I love like white paint. I have 50 million different white paints I use at all points in time. Because I'm always trying to keep it as absolutely smooth as possible and sort of altering it for different effects. All right, Zach. Hey, Vince, I play orcs and I'm planning on magnetizing my bases for storage and bringing them to games. Curious what magnets you recommend and how you do secure them. Sure, absolutely. I'll tell you exactly because I do the same thing. Here you go. You ready? Go to like eBay or something and find neodymium N52 magnets. You want the, what size is this? The 16th of an inch. It's like this size. Okay. I think they're like a 16th of an inch tall by a 1/4 inch in diameter or something like that. Anyways, you put one on the bottom of every base. And then what I do is I have a big, plastic tub container, just some random plastic tub you can buy anywhere. And you go get yourself a cookie sheet, like a tin cookie sheet or something like that. If you order it from Amazon or go buy a cheap one, they're a couple bucks. And you stick that thing to the bottom of you just like glue it to the bottom or blue tack it to the bottom or whatever. If you blue tack it or something like that, you can actually pull it back out. Or if you want to get really smart, you magnetize it to the bottom of the plastic thing so you can then lift it out. And there you go. That's it. And I just stick all my models down on the cookie sheet and they don't, like, I can turn the thing sideways. They don't move. Never had a problem. Never had a model break. Taking them to tournaments and stuff like that. Driving hours. Always been fine. What do you think of Andrea color? Eric Just, haven't used them. It's not really a paint line very readily available in the US. I mean, I know there are many European pro painters who use them, so I assume they're fine. But I have no personal experience with them to judge. How would you paint green craggy skin on a large model? I don't know what you mean by that. Can you give me some more detail? Like what model? What do you mean by craggy? Like, I need a little more detail to understand that. Okay. Aviad, any tips on working with heavy body titanium white, kind of struggling with leaving visible brush strokes? Yeah, sure. You generally want to put a relatively decent dollop along and then smooth it out. You keep voiding it and smoothing it out. You paint on the miniature. Like, so like, well, here, let's just do it. Let's do it together real quick. I happen to have some right here on my palette that's relatively undiluted. Okay, here's my hand. Okay. So I'm going to put that dollop down. All right, I'm trying to paint this thing. And I'm going to wipe it off. And then I'm going to take it. I'm doing this backwards. How's that? Yep. Just that easy. And just like that, he was gone. All right, so there you go. Hopefully that helps. Mickey Jenver, second question. You are trapped on top of a mountain with all your paints, but only one size of model. Infantry, cavalry, ogre, or monster. Which side do you choose? Monster, obviously. Obvi, Mickey. Not even a question. Monsters are always the best. Thoughts on P3 paints? Yeah, I mean, I've used a few of them. I don't like pots generally, but they have some really great, vibrant colors. Dallas Kemp is the main person who makes that, or who designs that paint line. And obviously he's a great artist and a great chemist with that kind of stuff. So like they're good paints. They're really good paints. I know like Sam Lenz is a big fan of them. It's literally the pot that bothers me. I don't feel like decanting all of them. Although that being said, I may actually pick up a few this year when I'm at Adepticon because they introduced a couple new colors I really like. So there's a sort of tealish color, and everybody knows I'm the tyrant of teal. So I'm willing to decant a few of them. Let's see. I will say I really love P3 inks. I do have all those, and I love their inks are in dropper bottles somehow. I don't like they've clearly heard of dropper bottle technology. Let's see. Bartek. Hey Vince, any thoughts on acrylic gouache? Gouache. Yes, I have many thoughts on them. I love them. They are super fun. I have a nice set. I use them every so often. So acrylic gouache paints. I don't know how to say that. I'm just going with gouache. I don't know if that's how it's said, but gouache doesn't matter. Yeah, sure. So the big difference with them is that they generally don't have medium. They have more of a water color medium. So like water will keep reactivating them. You can mix them with normal paint still. You can mix them with acrylic medium and then they'll seal. My best advice is if you're going to use them, you want to make sure your brush is relatively not dry, but like not having active water in it when you touch the model, or you'll just explode it like watercolor paint. But they're really, really good for blending because you can carefully reactivate things. Like they will be the smoothest blends you've ever achieved outside of like oil paints. Because you can keep reactivating them and keep working them, and you can put them on relatively thick and then just smooth them out. And then if you varnish over the top, they're locked. So you generally want to use like a spray varnish or an airbrush varnish, but that'll lock them in. They are like ultra, ultra, ultra matte because they're lacking acrylic medium. Acrylic medium is what creates satin and gloss finish. Pigment by itself will be very matte. So yeah, that's my advice on it. Let's see. Do you use brush soap? Yes, absolutely. Of course. 100%. I use 2 different brush soaps. I just broke my keyboard that's down here, but I don't care. I use 2 different brush soaps, standard, master's brush cleaner, and Gentastic's drunken brush goop. This is a little more for reshaping. This is a little more for cleaning. You both do both, but I like them. They're both good. Grape or cherry. They're both good. Okay. Let's see. Oh yeah, doing a ghost video. Yeah, it's on my list. Like sometimes these things just get shuffled around and I don't have a chance. It's funny too because I knew what I was going to use for the ghost model. I need to find a ghost model. I don't have one right now. Like I have no Nighthaunt in the house. I had a Soul Wars box set sitting unopened. It was for a friend. And I got it for him, and it was just sitting here in my house waiting for him to come over for like months. And finally, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to open the box and take a ghost out to do that tutorial. And the day after I decided that, he called me and said, okay, I'm coming over this weekend to get the box. So there you go. Irony. Apparently, I psychically summoned him. I will. It's still on the list, though. Don't worry. Let's see. What do you use as the base color when using fluorescent green through an airbrush? Yellow, white, those kind of things. Ivory, depending on what exact tone I'm going for. Something with a high lumosity, whatever. Something because it's going to be very transparent. So you want to have a very bright color underneath. So generally, a yellow white is the combination that's going to be like pow and hit you. Can I use the same compressor that I use to shoot nails for your airbrush? Probably, as long as you can turn the PSI down to like 15 to 18. Probably. You need an adapter, but there are people who use bigger compressors. All right. Yip Snake. With squig teeth, can I start off with the mid-tone and then wash and highlight? Yeah, sure. With everything, you can start off with the mid-tone and then shade down and highlight. Abso-freaking-lutely, man. It's a great tactic. So that'll do you well. Much of my painting is done in that exact style. So yes, all teeth and bone. You can start out with the mid-tone. In fact, if you go back and look at my how to paint bone tutorial, that's exactly what I do. Like I have a detailed bone tutorial way back from early in or like pretty early on, but I stand behind that one. I think it's actually a really good tutorial that's held up over time. And not all of my early videos, I feel that way. But yeah, that one holds up, and that's exactly what I do. Hi, Vince. If I zenithal with a black and white rattle can, do I just spray white from the top, or should I do an angle too? I mean, yeah, you want to do an angle too-ish, but like when we say from the top, I don't mean like you have to have the model and then this is the only place you're allowed to shoot at. Like, I think people take the concept too literally. Like, it's this, you're doing this. It's at a high angle, right? Because some models are like, there's no one size fits all for this. If I'm a model that's like, man, like all hunched over, like, yeah, I get it. Like, I'm going to hunch over right now. There you go. I've turned my head away from the upper lights. Is this black? No, there's still like light bouncing off of my desk and hitting my face, right? So like you want to create a little bit of that ambient light. So it's kind of think of, here's what I'll say. Imagine there's a funnel above your model. Stay within the funnel. How about that? Okay. Daddy Hammer. I have limited hobby space, my car. Oh boy. Can you recommend a good compact wet palette or make my own using a plastic tub? Yeah, I mean, you could make your own using a plastic tub, but the Redgrass, like regular wet palette's actually super small. It seals. Like it actually like locks, seals, and even has a little strappy thing around it too. So it's actually like this big. It might be the perfect wet palette to be mobile for you like that, honestly. It's a little expensive. I think it's like 35 pounds, but they're really good. Like, I will never go back to not using a Redgrass palette. They have sold me completely. Like, I did the review. I gave it a solid A. The only downside is cost. This thing has been a workhorse. Never gets stinky. Holds water so well. That sponge is when they say that it's naturally antimicrobial, it's like Mack Weldon underwear over here. Like, it's pretty great. Well, thanks, Alex. That's very nice. All right. Let's see. Gem Sue. All right. Hey, Vince, I'm painting my Zangor units like you're painting blue flesh. Cool. My issues are coming in blending the darker and lighter blues using GW paints, Vallejo thinner, and glazed mediums, but I'm having a hard time getting the glazes to blend like your scale 75 example. Yep. This is one of those things. Like scale 75 blends really easy. GW paints don't. I mean, that's part of you're working with a challenge here of a paint differential. Now, the answer is you may need to look more at like wet blending to get those to be smoother together. That's probably the answer. So where you see me paint with it, you may want to look at more of a wet blending type of take on it. That'll help you. If the paint's still wet, it'll blend easier. You may also want to try, instead of just using glaze and thinner medium, maybe try some retarder medium in your paint, where it's to dry the slowing time, because that might actually do the trick for you. It'll stay wet longer. You can wet blend easier without using like thicker paint necessarily, and maybe that'll work. That would be my other goal. When I have paints that don't like to blend well, retarder medium and wet blending can often be a really good solution. So I have some videos on using like retarder medium and on using wet blending and stuff like that. And so I would take a look at those, but that would be my best advice. It is going to be more challenging. The GW brighter blue paints tend to use a lot of white, and so they tend to have a high opacity and tend to blend pretty crappily, unfortunately. But hopefully that helps. Okay. Let's see. Crazy Horse. If I was going to use green ghost tint, would you use a regular zenithal or a different color set? Do you mean like you're trying to do spooky ghosts, like Hexwraith ghosts? Yeah, I'd still do a normal zenithal. Green generally goes well over that kind of thing. You might, depends on like what you wanted out of your green ghosts. Like if you want them to have a more sickly color, I would add a little yellow or an ivory to the top. So that way they have that more sickly look. If you want them to be colder, you could, like, after you do the dark gray black, you could literally paint them in a dark blue and then do a gray and then a white, and it would tint them into like this sort of like cold green, because it'd be green blue. So, but sure, either would work. All right, HL17. Did you know any studio? Stupid jumping text. Okay. All right. Do you know any studio manufacturer that makes historical miniature in 75, 90 mil like Pegaso miniatures, but use cheaper material? I really like Pegaso, but their product is a bit too high for me. I don't. I mean, like, and that's just because I don't really know historicals, man. I'm sorry. Sorry, I've been talking for like 40 minutes straight. It's never been a thing that interests me. I don't like painting historical models. I find them boring. I like neon colors and bright, crazy stuff and fantasy things. It's just what interests me. But I mean, there's got to be some out there. I'm sure there is, but I couldn't tell you. Vince, could you do another one of your analysis videos comparing the comic book heavy metal style with the more realistic scale model Forge World style? Did this come out of like the Outer Circle video? That was my question. It'd be an interesting comparison. Roddick, please open a Patreon or explain why you won't do that. Because I have a job. I like my job. I enjoy, like, I have a normal job I do, and I really enjoy it. I don't do this as a money-making thing. And I don't want to set that expectation. I may, have a Patreon someday, but I like, there are better things you could give your money to than me, is my short answer. Like, I enjoy doing this. I like doing it just for the interaction with the community and to teach, because I really like teaching people and think it's fun. I love doing videos like this and interacting with people. And I hope this is all helpful. And if I feel like if I introduced money into the equation, it would be changing one of the fundamental value propositions of why I'm about this. And I would start thinking through that lens. And I don't want to do that. Now, if someday this grows enough to the point where I say, maybe I will change careers and maybe this will be like the thing I do full time, then sure. I mean, I would open a Patreon, because then I'm trying to make this my full-time job, but then I would also have vastly expanded services I would offer too, beyond just my videos. So that's basically the answer why I really do appreciate it. And I want to make ways for people to engage through stuff like, if we do some expanded merchandising and stuff, and having some hobby cheating merch and stuff like that. And that's what I'm looking to do out of this first round of merch, is just whatever little bit of money we get from that will just be reinvested into doing a full merch push to buy some additional art from artists. Because I'm not going to ask anybody to do art for free ever. I don't believe in that. People should be paid for their work. And so I understand the irony of what I just said, but I can make the choice to do this for free, but I'm never going to ask an artist to do something for free. I do believe in paying artists, especially ones who are trying to make a living doing their thing. And so that's what it'll get reinvested into, just fun art that I can then go out and find, a good method of distribution for. So there you go. Hopefully that explains why. It's not anything else than that. But there you go. Have I seen the new Scale 75 Kickstarter? Yeah, I'm gonna go in but I'm doing the $40 or €40, whatever it is. It's like $45, I think, American, but level where you get to pick any 12. That's the one I'm doing. Okay. Start a Patreon or tell me where to send you a soda. If you see me in person, feel free to buy me a Diet Dr. Pepper. That's fine. I don't mind that. Dejan. I'm just going to stick with that. I'm bad at names. Hey, Vince, any tips for painting gray armor on robots to make it more visually interesting? Sure. Yeah. Like gray armor, just like straight gray. Yeah. I usually work blue in, like a slight blue. That'll make it look a little more steel, but that can be fun. I also really like working, like red tones into gray, very subtle red tones. So think like hull red, that kind of dark red brown. I think can add a really important warm shadow. So I use it into the shade colors, take the highlight out to a more like white gray, but then the shade color contains this kind of like gray, red, brown. I think that has a nice punch to it. It makes it gives a warmth to the normal empty coldness of gray. And can actually feel it makes the model feel more quote unquote alive. I understand it's a robot. I understand it's supposed to be a machine, but like, human beings just like to see color in things. We recognize that as realistic because there's generally color in everything in the world around us due to light pollution. So that's my trick. Any tips for painting larger surfaces like vehicles without an airbrush? Just get an airbrush is not really an option right now. Oof. Well, that's my answer. I mean, I'll tell you that right now. No, beyond that, bigger brush. I guess like get a nice brush, get your paint really well prepared and smoothed out. and do multiple thin layers. There's really no other way to do it over such large flats like that. I mean, an airbrush is a game changer. You don't they don't paint cars with a house paintbrush, right? And there's a reason for that. But I understand if it's not an option. A large, relatively flat brush with some nice thin paint, probably some flow improver so it self levels really well, and then just a couple thin layers, and you can get there. You'll be fine. Todd Kemp, Vince, I've got a big mini I'm finishing up at the moment for a D&D game tonight. I want to varnish him with some Vallejo matte varnish. I have an airbrush, but no airbrush thinner. Is there any other good way to thin it? You don't want to put water in it, and generally thinner is the only thing to do. I mean, I would recommend just using AK Interactive Ultra Matte Varnish. Like, do you need to varnish it for tonight? Are people going to put their Cheeto hands all over it? Can you like smack their Cheeto hands away from it until you can get some of that or get some thinner? That's what I would do. But yeah, I mean, thinner is generally what you want to do. You don't really want water in it. You could thin it out with any sort of flow improver, airbrush flow improver, or thinner medium, or anything like that. But yeah, you don't want to use water because you're then purposely trapping water in your varnish. That's generally a no-no. Mickey R had a very good point. Yeah, using like an army painter spray can, rattle can is also another good way to do vehicles. So at least you get a nice solid base color down. Thank you, Mickey. Also a great point. I never think about rattle can just because so rare I use them, but that is a really good point. We're helping each other. Got any tips on doing realistic heavy rust? Yes, I have a video on doing realistic heavy rust. And it involves stippling and washing and stippling and washing and stippling and washing through lots of brown and orange tones. If you look at how to do, there's a video in the hobby cheating series about doing heavily weathered steel, and that does it's exactly that. Like, it is an orc tower that I rusted out completely. You can also go back and look at the salt chipping video I did, because if you really peeled that off, that will also give you very realistic rust. So either one of those methods are perfectly viable. Kate Rush. Hey, Vince, did you try the new Warcolors gel shades line? And or do you have any tips on how to use them? I tried them a little. I'll be completely honest. I don't know that I'm going to do a review. I'm not sure about them yet. I really don't know. I need to play around with them and decide if I really want to do a review. I have no good advice for you either, because I haven't cracked that nut yet either, Kate. So sorry about that. How is Westworld so far? Good. I'm at the end of season 1. Please don't spoil anything for me. Thank you. I like it. It's very fun. I like ideas of consciousness, and I was a philosophy major in college, focusing. I had a dual focus on epistemology and moral philosophy. And so the concepts of both how are we good and how do we know things are the two areas I found most interesting to go get a degree in. That show seems to basically be about those two things. So yes, I enjoy it for the same reason I enjoy The Good Place, by the way. All right, Lysander, which paint do you use for dark freehand text? I add flow improver to me, but it's either too thin, so it doesn't stand out on the parchment. Okay, dark freehand text. Gotcha. All right, so like on a purity seal or something. Sure. Payne's Gray ink or just straight black ink from FW is one of the most potent, powerful, pigmented black inks in the freaking universe. Like, you can mix a drop or two of sepia in it to give it a slight brown tone, which will work, or a drop or two of Payne's Gray. Like a mix of Payne's Gray and black to make blue black ink, and a mix of sepia and black to make brown black ink, both of which are viable depending on what you're trying to do. And then just like touch into flow improver and go. It's ink. It's meant to work like text. Don't use paint. Don't use paint when you're trying to do hyperfine freehand. If you put paint in an ink pen, the ink pen would not work. If you put ink in an ink pen, well, I mean, I think we know where that goes from there. Okay. All right. Okay, Tim Paul. I love how quick and organic oils seem to blend on James Wapple's live stream, and wonder if it's advisable to give it a try even as a beginner. What would be needed apart from the paints? Yes, it is certainly advisable. Make sure if you're using it in tandem with acrylics, just make sure you're varnishing in between layers. There are ways you cannot do that, but I certainly wouldn't recommend it as a beginner. So varnish in between your layers. Yeah, I mean, you need some relatively decent sized synthetic brushes. You need a good set of oil paints. I like the Winsor Newton Winton oil paints. That's what I use. And you need some white spirits. I mean, really, that's about it. I use the same white spirits that James does, which is this stuff. It's the Mona Lisa odorless paint thinner, 100% odorless mineral spirits. You can generally get big bottles of it pretty cheap. And when they say odorless, it actually is. It's like, well, I mean, I say that understanding that I have no sense of smell, or I have some, but it's highly muted. I can smell almost nothing in the world. Like I walk around in life with just basically the world smelling like nothing to me at every day. So that's years and years and years of allergies and everything else that has destroyed my nasal cavities. But it doesn't smell like anything to me. How about that? That's all you need, really. And yeah, they're super fun. Painting with oils is great. It's something more people should try. It is fast and easy. Now, Wapple's a master. I mean, he's been doing it 20 years, so don't hold yourself to his standard, right? But it is definitely a great thing to do. About the Kickstarter for the new scale color range. Yes, I mentioned that. I'm going to do the 12 in there. Videos. Oh, Merchant Prince is recommended to look up some ammo of Mig Jimenez for realistic rust. That's good. Yeah, it's a good shout out. Those are good videos. I like those too. Justin McCoy has some older videos too around about doing realistic weathering. Those are pretty good. Might want to check those out. Rick. Hey Vince, I converted using a wet palette. I am noticing if I leave paint on the palette, even with it closed up, the paint starts to separate GW paints. What should I be doing to avoid this? Nothing. It'll happen. I mean, just mix it back together the next day. As long as it doesn't separate out too far, you're fine. Leave your lid slightly askew so that it doesn't create a completely humid environment in there. Like it'll still stay very wet and you'll still be increasing it, but you don't need to don't seal the palette. Instead, leave it just slightly askew. So a little bit of air is still moving in and out. That will stop that from happening. Certain paints are going to be more apt to separate than others depending on that paint's chemistry. And it's not really range specific. It's often paint specific because normally colors have to be mixed with different chemistries. So it's not always a universal thing. Second question, will the changes to Google Plus affect the PMP? Yes, it will. It's going away. Yes, we are going to move. Yes, Kieran and I are testing right now what that will be. And yes, we will have it will continue on in its new form, probably in the month of March. So just so you know. When are you uploading the video about masking fluids? I should do that one still. I don't use masking fluids barely ever or at all because I just don't like them, but I will do a video on it. I have it on my list still. I have about, as you can see, just from what I've mentioned, there are always more videos. Okay. HL17, did you ever do a heavily modify? Do you ever heavily modify the pose of a miniature? And if you do, how did you do that? Oh yeah, sure, many times. I mean, depends on what you're trying to do. Cut the piece and reattach it. Like, here's the simplest answer. Let's say you've got a straight arm and you want to make a bent arm, right? Well, you're gonna cut it here. And then you're going to cut an angle out, like that, at this shape. And then you're going to reattach it like that. If that was your leg, right? Your leg went from straight to being in a kickback position. But yeah, sure. And then just generally I'll just glue it, leave the gaps, connect what I can, glue it in, get everything in place, and then green stuff the gaps back together. It's generally my best advice. Don't worry about trying to make the cut piece go exactly flush. Fix it later with putty and green stuff. That's my best answer. Where do you go? Websites, internet groups, when looking for ideas for a fig or army? The internet. I mean, I know that's. Oh, I'll give a real answer. Everywhere on the internet. No, putty and paint. Just Google image searches. Facebook, Twitter. Our PMP group. Everywhere. I keep a library of images on my phone and on my computer. If I see an image that looks cool to me, I save the picture immediately. I keep it in a folder called inspiration. And every so often I just peruse that. Sometimes if I'm doing a specific project, I'll go out and hunt types of images. By the way, I look at art too, not just miniatures. I go to art Pinterest and stuff like that and look for that stuff. So I'll just save all those photos. That's generally my answer. Like I ravenously collect any image I think is cool, and then save that in a file for inspiration. And that's 2D art, cells from animation, other people's miniatures, everywhere you want. The internet is a bevy of images for you. Just look everywhere and find inspiration. Follow like Twitter profiles of people who share art and stuff like that. And look at their work and be inspired is my best answer. And then you're supporting some artists too, which is cool. Gouache. All right, cool. Ralph Hummel, do you know your approximate budget for hobby supplies compared to the budget of your miniatures? I have no idea. I couldn't even begin to guess. Like I generally don't spend a lot of money on it, to be completely honest. Most of my money spent on like paints and supplies and stuff. I don't tend to buy a lot of miniatures. I never buy anything I don't fully intend to paint, and I don't buy stuff that's not a thing I'm currently working on. So I'm very controlled with my purchasing. I have detritus built up over 20 years, of course, like anybody does, where, I've either won stuff or gotten stuff or whatever. So there's plenty of extra figs that are just weird projects sitting in my closet. But like, I'm very intentional with my purchasing. I try to keep both under a very tight control. The only thing I usually splurge on is paints, because I love paint, and I love playing with paints. I think it's fun. But other than that, I tend to be pretty minimal, honestly. Mickey says she just bought the black 2.0, and have I thought about that, or the black 3.0? No, I don't like it because it's so matte. It actually looks gray. This is my wife, by the way, who the dogs are very excited to see. It's so matte black, it actually can end up being gray when put in normal lighting and stuff. But I mean, give it a try. I've never been tempted by it. I don't want it to be that black. Yeah. Oh. So yeah, that's my advice. How do you go about painting the Shadespire Sylvaneth weapons? Well, I mean, I haven't painted them, but I would do it the same way I did all the weapons, which, if you look at my video on quick, simple, non-metallic metal weapons, that's how I would do it. I'll tell you right there. That's how I painted all of my Sylvaneth weapons. I would do it, and including like all the Tree Rev weapons, I would do it the same here. Let's see. How would you paint the demonic weapons where it transitions from metal to flesh, or the other way? Kind of just that. Paint metal and then paint flesh into it. I tend to, like, if there's a transition into metal, I will tend to not use metallic paints. That way you don't have to try to navigate the TMM to NMM bridge. I'll just do the weapons in NMM and then take a dark color. At transition points, you want dark colors. And so you just kind of glaze in some transitions between the two. Like, where there's flesh, it should get dark purple and then go into a dark color on the weapon and then go out into brights. So you get this sort of, the darkness will hide sort of the transition, right? All right. Well, we're about at our hour here. So I'm going to start going into like lightning round. Here we go. Sludric, when spraying ink through an airbrush, how do you avoid the awful surface texture? Glaze medium or PSI? I don't have any bad surface texture when I spray inks through my airbrush. I don't know what you mean. I spray at 18 PSI and use standard Vallejo airbrush thinner. I've never had a problem. Comes out smooth as butter. I have no texture. I would say maybe, I don't know if you're spraying it too high of a PSI or not. Vince, I just started a Harlequin's army. Any tips for doing the fine detail and diamonds? Yes. Time is a big one. It takes forever. But paint the lines individually. Get all your lines going one direction correct, and then come back and do the cross lines in the other direction, and then paint the diamonds in between. That's my best advice. When I've painted some Harlequins over time, and that was the way I did it, and that's how you get it nice and even. I'm about to Zenithal Daughters of Cain. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Okay. Boy, how far behind am I? Okay. I'm about to Zenithal Daughters of Cain. For the leather thigh-high boots, I am going for a dark scarlet. I'm assuming I should put a dark brown for the shades and a lighter brown or tan for the highlights. Yeah, that would work perfect. That would make that look really deep, rich scarlet. Yes. Roddick, what do you think about red grass painting handle? Haven't used it. I've used a little hobby holder thing, but my painting handles are this. I just use old paint things with blue tack on the top, man. My favorite paint handle is a one I got from Joe Orthaber with the Joe Orthaber Studios. I have Joe's card here somewhere, but I recommend reaching out to Joe. You can look him up. He does a bunch of woodcraft, and I got this from him, and I love it. I use it all the time. It's so perfectly shaped to my hand. Like if you look at that, that's like boom. It's like literally exactly perfect. So this is the best one I have. I love this one. That's what I use for like when I'm doing one model. Oh, no ghost using the ghost tint for like an enamel armor. Yeah, sure. Just the answer is yeah, thin glaze over the top and you're good. Is there Nasaj, is there any way to make a clean gold more visually interesting? Painting runes into Magmadroth, but they just look so flat, even with shading. Silver touches of highlights, like you want the edges to gleam. Yeah, also, you can glaze in a color. Gold can reflect purples and things like that, or greens, and that will create visual interest. Do I do any kit bashing? Yes, of course, all the time. I mean, that's literally this unit that I'm doing right now. Like, this is my second unit of Hellstriders, and, you know, that's elf arms and whips and stuff like that. So, absolutely. Kelly Audia, I got one live. Did you mention painting faces earlier? I just got on. I have an airbrush and want a better than average skin recipe. What are you looking for, Kelly? Drop me your question. I'll try to get back to. I'll make sure I get back to you at the end. I don't know what you mean by that. I didn't mention painting faces. I have a video on painting faces. How do you choose a good dry brush color for browns, dark browns, aka Skaven fur? I always just use ivory and then do light thin glazes back over to bring it all in line. Brian S. I'm really struggling making purple tinted silver. I got really uneven coverage with the glaze over the silver, and I'm not sure why. Any tips? Purple ink is generally your best bet. Grab a Dollar Rowney FW ink or Intensity Purple. Get a little bit of flow improver into your brush along with some water. Get it through there and wick off all the excess, and then just do a nice, thin, solid pull down. Let it dry. Do a second one. That's my advice. Alstein. Painting Blight King's army, and I want to have 3 different flesh tones to separate the units. How would you go about painting healthy green, infected Caucasian, and gray? I have a video on painting putrid and dead flesh. That's what you want to look at, because that literally gets into all the flesh tones you're talking about right there, because I show how to do gray flesh and how to turn flesh more putrid and progressively more so, and how to use green tones and stuff like that. That video will be your answer. Okay. Any thoughts on gesso as a primer for acrylics? I have some. I haven't tried it yet, like doing a sort of wet on wet. I haven't really tried it. I don't know. I may play with it at some point on a larger figure. I don't know that it would really work on small size stuff, but maybe on like a monster. It's a thing I've thought about. Probably missed it, but are you going to do some Skaven tutorials? Maybe. If I can think of some interesting things to do with Skaven, sure. I mean, I try to always do at least a couple to the army that's currently happening. That way, like, you know, that way it's like it can help people out who are doing their stuff. Things that I want to do stuff that's sort of outside what you're just going to see in the GW videos, because obviously GW is going to put up a bunch of them, and like you don't need my advice for how to like dry brush or something like that. You know what I mean? Like for the most part, you can how to dry brush. Maybe a color is a question, but like how to dry brush. So I'll think on that and try to find some things. I think I will want to do one on doing proper like warp glow effects, because I have very specific ideas on that. And I think that's a thing people struggle with. And I actually have a kit coming where I'm going to do a lot of warp glow effects. There's like one Skaven kit that I don't have, and it's ordered. So they'll probably be used for that tutorial. What kind? Firing up your airbrush. What kind of booth do you use? That standard booth that everybody uses, like that little thing that folds down into a rectangle. It's like, I don't know what it's called, but it's just portable airbrush booth. If you like, literally, if you search that on Amazon, it's the first thing that comes up, folds down into a little rectangle, and you go. Okay. Let's see. Julian, hi from France. Hi. Good to see you. All right, let's see. Any other questions before we close out here? Oh, that's kind of cool. Well, I'm glad my speech is clear enough to understand. I've been accused of being difficult to understand and or sounding like Steve Buscemi, which I think is probably correct. I don't hear it, but when I listen to it back on like playback, when I listen to myself, because you hear your voice differently echoing through your own head. I think I do kind of sound like him. Let's see. Would you consider a hobby cheating on painting flesh with watercolors? Yes, I definitely do want to do that. All right. Oh, Oh, why are you using a glove? Are they comfortable? Yes, I have a glove on so much often because I'm in the middle of painting. Like I was painting before I did this, and I always the hand that holds or touches the model occasionally, I always have a glove. So that way I'm never leaving finger oils on there, or so I can test on the back of my thumb and stuff like that without getting paint on my hand. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, she was using hobby paper towels for cleaning, but apparently one of the dogs had an upset tummy and kind of like threw up just a little bit on the floor behind me while we were talking, and I didn't notice because I've been in the middle of this. So it's fine. Things happen. They're dogs. She's okay. Let's see. Green stuff or milliput for sort of filling gaps. Yes. Doesn't matter. Either are fine. Is my wife coming to the class with me? No. No, she is not. That's not a defense. She does come places with me, just in this case, she's not. Let's see. Any tutorials on the night haunts coming soon? Like I said, I still the ghost tutorial is still on the list. I'll see what I can do. Smoldering black cloth, think Dark Souls where the edges are burning. Would a white fluorescent with red orange glazes be right? Yeah, sure. Just a bright white. You want it to be very dark for the vast majority of the thing. Yeah, and then there should be no white left. And it should just be like a sort of bright orange on the very, 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 very edge. And then very quickly go up into like a deep, rich orange into a deep whole red into black. Regarding skin tone, Space Marine faces 2-to-1 dwarf elf skin tone. Wash with Reichland and go back up. I don't see the faces one. I will look. Yeah, sure, that would work. With your airbrush, I think that would be great. That'll give you a nice red tone that's kind of evened out a little bit. You'll get the red back in that. Look at how I do the painting in the speed painting flesh hobby cheating tutorial, Kelly, and that exactly. But I like that mixture for them. I think that would work really well. Yes. Let's see. Should get my kids to bed. So this kid's still up. Yeah, I definitely have no advice on that. I guess cough syrup, I think, is probably the time-tested way to make that happen. What do I think about color shifting paints? I don't like them. I heard somebody talk about using them to dry brush. That could be interesting for like tips. I don't like them in general because you can't control the shades and highlights. They don't work in scale. I don't find them to be fascinating outside of a very, very, very few specific uses. Personal opinion. Just added the Dalarani Purple Lake ink to my Amazon cart. You won't regret it. That Purple Lake is so good. In fact, it happens to be literally right here. I keep a separate little paint thing next to my desk that is my working paints, and then they go back on the wall. I have like a little on my desk. People I see like paint scattered all over their desk. I have like a specific nail polish rack sitting here that is just for my current projects paints, and then they all go back up to their home. All right. Forged blackened armor. I have a video on painting black where I talk about painting blackened armor, like dull blackened armor. So I would recommend checking that out. That'll give you the way that I would do it. I talk about painting black of all different types, cloth versus leather versus metal and stuff like that. So that's my best advice. Okay, and with that we went a little long, but that's okay. That's all right. This was good. A lot of great questions. Oh, Maroc says, I'll answer this last question because I find it interesting. I'm using zenithal religiously now, or trying to. I'm having trouble with it actually giving me the contrast I'm looking for. Does this mean I'm doing it wrong, not using enough glazes, or the zenithal isn't strong enough? Could be either. Lessen your white. Or sorry, yeah, lessen your white. Don't overblow the white. Keep a little more black in there, and thin your glazes more. Like, one of the problems you often have with zenithal is you have too much contrast. So either your base coats are too thick or you've covered over too much. That would be my best advice, Maroc. How do you properly store paints? I don't know. I just keep them on. I keep them on nail polish racks all around me. Like, I have 5, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I have 8 nail polish racks around me full of them. They just sit there. Like, but my room is relatively evenly. This office is underground, so it's, as you can see from that little window right there. That's a basement window. So it's relatively dry and even temperature down here. But just that, don't store them in like super hot or places like that. There you go. With that, that brings us to a close. Hopefully that was all good. That was so many great questions. I hope nobody feels short shrifted. I try to move fast through these so that I can answer more. If you still have any questions, of course, feel free to leave them down in the comments below. I'm always happy to follow up and answer questions. But as always, thank you so much, everybody. Really appreciate it for coming out. We do this once a month. This one was earlier in the month than normal because I am, as I mentioned, teaching next weekend. If you're interested in taking a class with me, my next class, like this next weekend, is sold out. But I have a class April 27th and 28th in Dallas. I'll be teaching at Adepticon. I think all those are sold out, but I'll be teaching April 27th and 28th in Dallas, Texas. We're doing the display quality Night Titan class, which even if you don't normally paint Night Titans, it will be a very valuable class for you because we'll cover things like metal and weathering and battle damage and freehand, and it's going to be a super fun time. But there's a link down in the description. You can go to check that out. I'd love to have you along. As always, like I said, it's really fun. It's a full like 2-day weekend workshop. And no, I am not at LVO right now. I'm teaching next weekend. LVO is going on right now. LVO is the big convention I don't go to. Too far away. I don't enjoy Vegas. I don't like drinking. I don't like noise. I don't like people. I don't gamble. Hence, no Vegas. There you go. But I will be I'll be in Dallas April 27th, 28th. I'm also doing a class in Olympia, Washington, and Chicago. All of those are down in the dates. You can check the description for that stuff. It'll be a lot of fun. So look forward to seeing you in future videos, in the comments, or in person at one of those places. But as always, I very much appreciate you hanging out with me and asking great questions and watching this. And we'll see you next time.